All right, awesome. So we have read our I can statement. Let's warm up with a factoring problem. So we are on frame 3 of the Jamboard. On frame 3, I want to give everybody a moment, and I want you to factor what we have here. So remember, our factoring, we're finding our A, our B, and our C. And your goal is to find some numbers that multiply to your C value and add to your B value. Now our C value here is negative, so this one is like our do now we did today, where you have to have 2 sets of each numbers. So I will give you guys a minute or so. I want you to factor this, and then I will be calling on some people for help, so make sure you are ready. Again, you should all be factoring. If you didn't hear that the first time, our instructions are that you are factoring this, what you see on the screen. That's where you have your answer in those 2 parentheses. All right, I'm going to pause that and let's hear from Gracie. Gracie, could you unmute yourself, if possible, and tell me what you got? Kind of walk me through it a little bit. Oh, Naomi, I'm sorry. We'll get you next time, Naomi.
I got x minus 2 and then x plus 5.
Okay, we got x minus 2 and x plus 5. Awesome. So, Gracie, how did you get those numbers?
I found factors for -10 that added to 3.
Exactly right. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Gracie. You can turn off your mic. So with -10, because it's negative, guys, like I said, you're going to need to have 2 sets. And there were really only 2 sets of numbers that multiplied to 10. But because it was negative, we had to flip-flop that negative sign. So here, if I added these up, I would get 9. That's not what we want. We're looking for 2, remember. And we keep going until we find the pair that works. Yeah. So the only pair that works here is -2 and 5. If I add those together, I'm going to get 3. Once you find the answer, you don't even have to go through the last one. We found it. Okay. I'm going to pause. What questions do we have on that? Because we're going to use this skill a lot today. All right, I'm going to take the silence as a good thing. So I'm going to move on to frame 4. So everybody, if you are on the Jamboard, we are now moving on to frame 4. Because what we're doing today, you're going to hear me say solve the quadratic, or you're going to see the directions that say solve the quadratic by factoring. And we want to know what exactly we're doing. What does that even mean? So before, we have seen this shape of a graph. Real quick, fun fact, does anybody remember what this shape of a graph is called? It was kind of a funny name, started with a P. If you remember it, you could throw it in the chat. What was that? What was the shape of a... Yes, thank you, Amara. It's called a parabola. So before, you guys had looked at those parabolas, and you were able to tell me what the roots were. Remember, roots are the same as x-intercepts. There were also other words for it. We had roots, zeros, or anybody got that last one? Roots, zeros, or solutions. Yes. So when I say solve, we're looking for those solutions, which really mean roots or x-intercepts. So on our parabola, if I were just looking at the graph, you guys are pretty good at this. We practiced this last week. We said, okay, it crosses the x-axis here and here. And you could give me those values, -1 and 2. And we'd be good. You'd write it as an ordered pair. Woo, problem solved. However, today what's going to happen is that we're not going to have this graph. We're only going to have this equation. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have to find these spots where it crosses the x-axis without a picture. We're only going to use this equation. So pretty cool. We're going to do it. All right, I am moving on to frame 5. Frame 5, we are going to jump right into it. So if I were you, if you are writing this on a separate sheet of paper because you didn't have printing capabilities at home, write down these steps. Now you can paraphrase a little bit, that's okay, but write down these steps so you know what to do. Also, make sure that you are getting this example that we do together. Okay, so steps, example. Basically, this entire frame you need to write down. All right, here we go. So first things first, our steps for solving or finding our x-intercepts. Set the quadratic equation equal to 0. Why would I do that? Let's think. If I look back at my graph, if I'm trying to figure out where it crosses the x-axis, my line right here, any spot on this x-axis, it's going to have a y value of 0. Here, because I'm not up or down, here, 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 all those spots, my y value would be 0. So if I take this equation in frame 5 and I set it equal to 0, I'm going to be able to find the x values where that's true. So I'm going to take this equation, x squared plus 3x minus 10, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. That's our first step. Make sure you're following along with me. You're writing this down. All right, now that I have this, now I am going to factor. So we did step 1. I'm going to factor now. And you guys actually just did this. If we go back to 2 frames ago, we already factored this. We found this answer. We found that it was x minus 2 and x plus 5. So using that answer, I'm going to say, all right, x minus 2 and x plus 5 equals 0. Cool. I did step 1. I did step 2. Now steps 3 and 4. This is where it gets new. This is a little bit different. Normally we would stop here. You'd give me those 2 factors. We'd call it a day. But that's not telling me my x-intercept. So to get my x-intercept or my roots, I need to do a bonus step. And what that says is I need to set each of these equal to 0. Why would I do that? Because let's think about what this equation is saying. It's saying, hey, when I multiply these 2 together, I get 0. And the only way that that happens, if you multiply 2 things together and get 0, is if one or both of those things are 0. Because let's think about it. Like if, 3 times 0 is going to be 0. 0 times negative 70 is going to be 0. 0 times 0 is 0. You need a 0 somewhere in there for at least one value. So what we do, I set both of these equal to 0. And now we have 2 one-step equations. So, Omar, if I wanted to solve this one-step equation, Omar, what would I do if I wanted to get x all by itself? If I wanted to solve this one-step equation, Omar, what am I going to do?
My bad. I was helping my mom, but is it subtract?
Subtract. So look here, I have x minus 2. I got to get x by itself. Right now it's being subtracted by 2. Remember, in our equations, we have to do the opposite. So what am I going to have to do?
Add?
Yeah, we're going to add 2 instead of subtracting 2. And remember, we have to do the same thing on both sides. Good job, Omar. So then from here, I can cross that off. And now I have x equals 0 plus 2, which is just 2. Yeah, Naomi, what's up? I saw you raise your hand. Oh, no. All right. I'll have you get our next one. Okay. I'm sorry. I appreciate that you are fully invested in today's lesson. That is awesome. So here I got my 2 answers just by solving my one-step equation. This is something that we learned way back in the day, very beginning of the year, and probably even in middle school. So I've done steps 1, 2, and 3. Our very last step, step 4, I have to write my final answer with what they call curly braces or curly brackets. Okay, what that looks like, I'm going to write x equals, I'm going to put a little squiggle here, and I'm going to write it from smallest to biggest. So -5 and 2. Those are my 2 answers. Now, if you're like, I can't draw that squiggle, couple hacks here. I like to think about it like if we zoomed in, it'd be like a weird profile of a person almost, kind of a very flat-faced profile. We got like a forehead, a nose, and a chin. I've also seen people do this thing where we draw parentheses, kind of an arrow, and then another set of parentheses. If none of these work for you, if you're like, I can't draw that, just at the very least, draw some sort of squiggle. I'll know what you mean. All right. I'm going to pause. What questions do we have after that first example? If you do have a question, you can either throw it in the chat or use the little raise hand button so I know. All right, so then let's go on to frame 6 on our Jamboard. On frame 6 in the Jamboard, I want you guys to try this. So do exactly what we just did. You're solving this quadratic. I am going to call on some people, so make sure you are ready. You are paying attention. I don't want to have to ask the question a million times, okay? We just don't have time for that. So please make sure you are paying attention. If you need to reference back to a previous question, here is our Jamboard link again. You can go back to frame 5. We just did this. I want you to give it your best shot. Also, if you get stuck, the steps are right there on the left-hand side. All right, so I'm going to give you guys like a minute and a half here. I will play some music. You are solving this yourselves. You got this. About 30 more seconds here, maybe a little bit more. We'll see. Try your very best. You are on frame 6. You are doing this problem. If you printed out the sheet of paper, it's number 1 on the sheet of paper. All right. Do I have a volunteer that wants to tell me their factors? Just the factors. If not, I'll just pick on somebody. I got through step 2. All right, Henos, I am picking on you. Henos, let's do, it's already set equal to 0, so we can skip step 1. We're on step 2, which was factoring. Can you unmute yourself, ideally, and kind of talk me through what we did there, or what we would do?
I got, for the factors, I got x plus 1 and x plus 3.
Perfect, Henos. And why is x plus 1 and x plus 3? Why are those the factors?
Because 1 plus 3 equals 4, and 3 times 1 equals 3.
Perfect. Good job, Henos. You can turn off your mic. You did great. So then from here, we have to solve our two one-step equations. So I got x plus 1, I'm setting it equal to 0. And I got x plus 3, and I'm setting it equal to 0. Now, Naomi, you wanted to answer the last time, so I'll let you answer this time. What would I do here? And then if you could give me those two answers, that would be awesome.
Okay, so from the first one, you're going to subtract 1 and put it on the other side.
Nice.
And so then you write the x, and then you put equals -1.
Perfect.
And then you subtract 3 from the other equation and put it on the other side. And then it'd be x equals -3. And then you write...
Awesome. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, do you want me to do the last one too?
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
Okay, and then you write x equals in the curly bracket. And then I put -3 with the comma and then -1 in another curly bracket.
Fantastic, Naomi. That was awesome. Good job, you guys. We did so good. Yeah, so at the very end, you're solving those one-step equations, and then Naomi did it perfectly. We put it in those curly little brackets, and we list it from smallest to biggest. Good job. Now, I need everybody in the meet, every single person. I want you in the chat to tell me where you're at, scale of 1 to 10. 1 being I'm lost, what just happened? 10 being I think I got this. Every single person in the chat. I want to know where you're at. Ooh, lots of high numbers. Awesome. Wow. Jaden. All right. Then let me go through one more example, and we will call it good with this type of factoring. Okay, one more example. Awesome. Just because you guys all said you were feeling pretty good. So I'm going to go on to frame 7. Frame 7, same idea. We just don't have those steps shown for us this time. So we're doing it from memory. Okay. Our first step was to set it equal to 0. Already done for us. We don't have to do that. It already is equal to 0. If it wasn't, though, if it just said like equals y or it was just this, you would have to set it equal to 0. Okay. What is my next step? If you know it, can you just throw it in the chat? My next step. Thank you, Amara. Yes, I'm going to factor. And so to factor, remember, we get our A, B, and C value. So I'm thinking of numbers that multiply to C and add to B. So I need things that multiply to -27. Now, this is a negative number for our C value. So there was something weird we had to do here. Does anybody remember if I have a negative C value, what's the kind of weird thing I have to do? If you know it, you can throw it in the chat. If I have a negative C value, I know it's kind of hard to explain. Just give it your best shot. If I have a negative C value, what do I have to do when I'm finding those factors? Make 2 sets with one or the other number being negative. Perfect explanation. I think that's better than how I explained it. Good job. So here, let's start off with 1 and 27. I'm going to write that twice, and then we'll flip-flop those negatives. And then we got 3 and 9. And again, I'll flip-flop those negatives. So I got all my factors. I know that all of these numbers multiply to -27. Nevaeh, all these numbers multiply to -27. What do they have to add to, though? Sorry, I dropped my pen. Ooh. What do they have to add to, Nevaeh? All these numbers multiply to -27. What am I looking for them to add to? Nevaeh? Going once, going twice. Erica, what do I need them to add to? Yeah, 6, our B value. So out of this list, there's only one of them that's going to add to 6. It's going to be that -3 and +9. So I'm going to put x minus 3, x plus 9. And then I'm going to set that equal to 0. Yes, Naomi. Sorry, I just saw your hand raise. Oh, you were going to, I keep catching it too late. I'm sorry. So then from here, I separate into my 2 equations. And away I go. Away I solve my one-steppers. I do a +3 here and on the other side. Cross it off, and I get x equals 3. With this x plus 9, to get rid of that +9, I got to do -9. Use your inverse operations. And I get x equals -9. So, yeah, sure. Let's share our answers in the chat. What did we get? And you even have those curly brackets on your keyboard. If you look, they're right above the normal brackets. Let's see if you guys can enter your final answer here in the chat. If you have your final answer, how I would write it. Hey, good. I got my curly bracket. And then I'm going to put -9 first and 3 second. And remember, this is different than just parentheses. If it's just parentheses, that would mean it's an ordered pair. Those curly brackets mean it's like a list. Good. All right. So I'm feeling pretty good here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of skip ahead here. I'm going to skip all the way. Stay with me. I'm going to skip all the way to frame 14. Again, frame 14. So if you are on the Jamboard, I just skipped to frame 14. Okay, if you're just looking at the Meet screen where I have it presented, that's okay. You don't have to worry about that. If you have the Jamboard pulled up, though, I skipped all the way to frame 14. And then if you have this sheet printed out, this is going to be on the back side of that sheet. All right, so let's talk about this. I have 2 problems here, or 1 problem listed twice, and it looks funky. There is something wrong with it. What is it missing? The B value. There's no B. Normally there's like an x squared, and then there's an x, and then there's the number. I have the x squared. I have the normal number, the constant. I don't have that middle term with just the x. So, that's weird. Then that means I won't be able to factor because I won't be able to think of numbers that multiply to C and add to B if I don't have a B value. So, there is a way that I can write a B value in here. And let's play with this idea. Let's imagine that I'm broke. I got no money, nothing. Okay. If I open my bank account, what would my balance of my bank account be if I say I have no money? Yeah, so same idea. Oh, and I see Caitlin, you're on top of it. Yeah, so if I have no money and my bank account balance is 0, if I have no B's, I can say the B value equals 0. And I would write this down if you are taking notes. I would say B value equals 0 if no B is shown. So if there's no B in the regular equation, you can add a B value of 0. So what that's going to look like is I'm now going to have x squared. I'm going to put a plus 0x. That was my B. I have 0 x's. I haven't changed anything. I've just put a 0 there. And then I have minus 64 equals 0. So now this looks like a regular factoring problem. Now I have my A, B, and C, and I can think of numbers that multiply to negative 64 and add to 0. So away I go. I'm going to make my factor tree of negative 64. Again, this is a negative, so I do have to have those 2 sets of each number. And I flip-flop the negative. What else multiplies to 64? If you know it, throw it in the chat. Thank you, Amara. There are a couple more too. What else multiplies to 64? Now, for 8 and 8, I could write 2 down, but if we look, if I flip-flop these negatives, since it's the same number, I really just wrote the same thing twice. Doesn't really make a difference. So I'm just going to write it once. I'm breaking my own rule here. Other things that multiply to 64, I got, I think, 4 and 16. So on and so forth. And we need all of those we need to find the pair that adds up to 0. So I'm sure some of you are looking at it and going, Miss Carr, I see it already. That's awesome. That just means you're getting better at factoring. Our two numbers that add up to 0 would be -8 and 8. When I add those together, I am going to get 0. So what I write then for my factors, I write x minus 8, x plus 8 equals 0. Am I done? No, absolutely not. I got to solve both of these. So now I have x minus 8 equals 0. I'm running out of room, so I'm going to write the other one down below. X plus 8 equals 0. When I solve those two one-step equations, for that first one, I'm going to get x equals +8. For the second one, I'm going to get x equals -8. And boom, I list my final answers in my squiggly brackets. Cool. Now, you might notice that I have a thing that says method 1 and method 2. Show of hands, use the little raise hand button. How many of you were just like, I literally hate factoring. I can't understand it. I just struggle. Show of hands. If I just described you. Everybody likes factoring? No way. I love factoring, but most of the time I have some people that absolutely hate it. Well, let's just say for a brief moment that you forget how to factor, okay? Or we forget to do this like b value equals 0 thing. And I come across this problem in the wild. Our second way that we can do this is that I can solve this just like a regular equation. So, Breland, if I have x squared minus 64 and my goal is to get x all by itself, what could I do to get x by itself? Hannah says, I don't like it, but it's not bad. Fair enough. Fair. Breland, what could I do to get x all by itself if I have this x minus 64? What am I going to do? Breland, going once? Going twice? Chloe, what do you think? Chloe, what can I do to get x all by itself? Hello? Chloe. Going once. Going twice. All right. Caitlin, what can I do to get x all by itself here?
Add 64 to the other side.
Add 64 to both sides. We're just basic one-step equation. We're trying to get that x all by itself. So now I have x squared equals 64. Okay, which is great. It looks sort of like I have x all by itself, but I don't, because I still have this x squared, and we just want x. I don't want x squared. So what we have to do is we have to undo this square. Does anybody know what the opposite of squaring something would be? If you know it, throw it in the chat. What's the opposite of squaring something? Yes, Gracie, awesome. The square root. So to undo this squaring, what I can do is I can take the square root of both sides. And as long as we do it to both sides, I haven't broken any math rules. we're fine. You can do any operation as long as you do it to both sides. So now I take the square root, and just like before, if I like added both sides, I could then cross it off. I can do the same thing over here on the left side of my equation. I can cross off the square root and the squared because they undo each other. And then I'm left with x equals the square root of 64. Now, square root of 64, anybody know that off the top of their head? That's basically asking what number times itself gives you 64. The square root of 16 would be 4. There we go, 8. 8 times 8 would give me 64. So 8 times 8 would give me 64. However, wouldn't negative 8 times negative 8 also give me 64? Huh. So in Algebra 1, we now come across this cool sign, if you haven't seen it before, because technically negative 8 and 8 would both give you the square root of 64, or are both the square root of 64. We come across this cool sign that is the plus or minus sign. Ooh. Okay, and this plus or minus says positive 8 and negative 8 are both answers. And so now in algebra, whenever you see a square root, you have to write this plus or minus sign as your answer because we have to consider the option that you could also have two negative numbers. And so we could write our answer either like this, we could leave it like that, or we could rewrite it with our curly brackets because what this says is that both positive 8 and negative 8 are an answer, which is the same thing as what this says over here. So I could also rewrite it with my curly brackets if we want it. All right, I'm going to pause. What questions do we have on that one? That one was a weird one. All right, awesome. I'm going to take the silence as a good thing. Let's go into frame 15. I want you guys to try this. So frame 15, you are choosing either one of those methods. I don't care which one you choose. So again, I'll go back to those methods. The first one was filling in a 0 for B. The second one was doing our square root. And I do not care which one you use. That is personal preference. I usually use method 1, but if you don't, it's up to you. I don't care. All right, I'll give you guys about a minute here, and then again, I will be calling on people, so make sure you're ready. All right. Let's hear from, I haven't heard from Abigail yet. Abigail, which method did you use? Method 1 or method 2? Abigail? All right, let's hear from Erica. Erica, did you use method 1 or method 2 here? Here, I'll go back out of those 2 methods. Which one did you use? Method 1 or method 2? Method 1. Okay, so method 1, if I'm filling in a 0 for my B value, what am I going to write then? Give me that whole equation. What am I going to write? You can either turn on your mic or just throw it in the chat, whatever is the easiest for you. Are we typing? Oh, we got it. Okay. X squared plus 0. Oh, don't forget your x, minus 25 equals 0. Good job. Then what we do is we think of numbers that add to multiply to negative 25 and add to 0. The only 2 numbers that works with are negative 5 and positive 5. Okay, so we're almost done. We're not quite finished. I'm going to set both of these equal to 0. And away we go. Solving our one-steppers. I get 5. And here I get negative 5. So my final answer, I'm going to write with those curly brackets of negative 5. All right, you guys, if you couldn't tell, that was actually the end of our time together. At this point, I want to